Hello and welcome to We Are the Deluge, a spoiler-free chapter-by-chapter podcast about the climate change novel, The Deluge by Stephen Markley. We are your co-hosts, Emily Crandall and John McMahon, living in constant fear of mistaking a guest for a waiter.
No. Danger zone.
Today we are discussing New Energy HoriZons set in 2032, the third chapter from Jackie's point of view, which we are presenting in the form of a pitch deck. A very realistic pitch deck.
Yeah, which we know a lot about, and which definitely suits all the things that happen in this chapter. There's no tensions or contradictions there whatsoever.
Yes. Maybe a little in non-just content warning.
Yeah.
This chapter contains a death by suicide.
Vividly.
Very vividly, which we will try to discuss carefully. But as we are wont to do, we will also be indulging the dark humor.
Yes, I think so.
Great.
We will follow Markley in that tradition.
Yes.
I think up first is our problem and solution. Mm-hmm. Any good pitch deck has that, I'm sure. What kind of character and what kind of person is Jackie? Like, there's, I think, a self-determination question or like self-definition question that's part of this chapter, is what it seems like to me.
Also, tough question for us as Jackie's age and
seriously.
as white people of like, are we like Jackie? Which is sort of why I opened with the her horror at this moment of mistaking like a beautiful woman of color who's a server at this fundraiser she goes to for accidentally mistaking her for a waiter, but she is, right? And I feel like she's tough in this chapter. She makes references to things, I think, that are contradictory and doesn't nod to those contradictions, but sometimes seems to hint that she feels them sort of affectively, even if she's not naming them. It's kind of a tough chapter to read, aside from also the traumatic stuff. Just like, what is she doing? Who is she? Like, what does she understand? Like, who is she for us, and who does she understand herself to be? Is an open-ended question, I think, on purpose.
I would agree that both of those are purposeful, open-ended questions for sure. I appreciate you calling out Jackie's same age cohort, almost exactly is us.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which Jackie's hyper attention to small details and dynamics that don't connect into some broader project is, I think, very much calling me out to some extent. Like, good on me. Give me my cookie for noticing, to use an example you were talking about before the show. Like, here are all of these Bengali immigrants, and I'm going to ask about them and figure out how they work in the flow of people around the world. But like, what is Jackie doing about that question mark? Or having that moment of like, she asks the person who's working there a clear question about that, but thinks maybe, oh no, I screwed up and like did a micro or more than microaggression. Yeah. And there's something about that kind of constant self-guessing and self-knowing, while crucially, as you point out, having that sort of deeper affective, she does understand affectively on some level what's happening.
Yeah.
That is very millennial coded in the way that we discussed this as a millennial coded novel.
And we watch her sort of intentionally, I think, look away from things that are difficult until she kind of can't.
Yes.
Yeah, like even her politics, I think, in this chapter are confounding.
Exactly. As are Fred's.
Yes.
For now. They get clarified later, but.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, they're at this fundraiser.
It's a fundraiser for the
for the fires.
For the fires in LA.
Jesus. Yeah. And, he says, like, Fred says in their justification that they have to be there, right? Fred needed to be there for the sheer volume of business being done by the slightly boozed wealth circulating, right? Which he seems to be kind of like annoyed by, but she's also sort of intrigued by the celebrity. She meets Obama.
Oh, we're going to talk about that for sure, because like, this is a very correctly critical of Obama chapter.
But then also her life in her world is interrupted by her family constantly. And so she's like literally pulled from the room to answer the phone. You know, her narration of it is that her sister's always calling with some emergency, and the emergency is just the constant presence of the thing she already feels guilty about, right? So it's not a new thing until it is, right?
I was wondering about that particular dynamic when I was teaching this novel because, I teach at a school where, like yours, there are a lot of first generation students. And there's, I think, particularly this concern that there's might be some disconnect that's created, right, as a first generation student vis-a-vis one's family, like socially or something like that through like the norm. When you enculturate yourself into like the norms of the hidden curriculum and all of that, and that might create some distance. And there's the emotional and not just physical distance that Jackie has from her family that she doesn't want to confront and narrates not wanting to confront, but she can't help but lapse into her traditional like disdain for her mom.
Yeah.
And that dynamic as well struck me as very psychologically telling on a certain level. And it's, it's a very much like I've been to therapy, that I understand that I have these tendencies. I can be aware of these tendencies. I can resist them. And on some level, I'm always bound to fall back into them. Yeah. And there's a way in which Jackie does that vis-a-vis her mom or her family in general throughout the chapter that is notable. Because your question about like, who is Jackie or who is Jackie to herself? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like absolutely no idea. I think that the clearest picture we get is when she goes to visit her mom the first time. And she's like, I'm just going to be in self-defense mode, she calls it, right? I will defend myself, not get mad if I don't want to. But she ends up blowing up at her mom, right? Saying, I did all of this. I worked for it all, sexist bullshit and all. And like, you, mom, resent me for all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of the clearest picture of who Jackie actually is. And yet her mom's also not wrong about the criticism. So her mom says on 392, all the money you got, it's an optical illusion. It ain't nothing. That's not wrong.
Which it's literally true, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're trading in, some like
AI-backed climate futures.
Right. Like even
green bookies.
More exaggerated. Yeah. Like even more exaggerated version of the speculative finance capital that is currently, funding basically the like coming together of Washington and Wall Street in our current moment, right? That like Trump's new cryptocurrency or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And like what's happening in the novel is like a slightly different technological version of something like that, right? Yes. It's like literally not real. And it's hard. I don't know. Like I don't read her mom as resentful at all.
Yeah, I read her mom as like they were fucked over by the agricultural political economy of the US. And that was really hard. And she had in her personal life, it was really hard because her husband was cheating on her and left her, right, for this other woman from the same community who goes to the same church as her.
Yeah.
And like, I read that as an analog to the way that he depicts people in the Keeper chapters, right? It's like a part of Mark Lee's Midwest home or Midwest comfort with depicting the Midwest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense that she would be watching the pastor's channel on repeat, right? Like she's also not wrong to think that like Democrats and regular news is sort of lying to her, right? Like, because they sort of are all the time, right? They're not lying in the like big lie way that somebody like Trump says they are, but they're all kind of lying to us all the time. Like it's very interesting. I found her very like the absence of kind of like opacity to her mom juxtaposed with our kind of inability to really access Jackie is really interesting.
Right. As if her mom are the parts of herself that she doesn't want to admit to herself, which is, again, it's like a classic, but I think perceptive psychological dynamic. I'm thinking about the moment when they're fighting and Jackie says, after her kind of rant about like how much she's accomplished and it's all because of her, et cetera, you resent me for it. And what have you done with your life, Mom? You go to the same church as Dad's fucking mistress. I picked my fork back up and jammed a big piece of noodle into my mouth. My mother never looked away from the TV. She was quiet for a moment while the anchors squawked. You work for your boyfriend, she said. And it's clear throughout this chapter that she has, understandably so, like a feeling about the fact that that is what is happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. But it's also, she's not willing to confront it in that way in her own narrative, right? She confronts it sort of orthogonally by like talking about like how much of a fantasy it feels like when they are together, and then like how fragile that fantasy is as soon as they're sort of outside of the bubble of it, right? And like for her, that's the frame. It's not like, am I just like every other woman, you know, quote unquote, who has in some way conceded to the demands and requirements of patriarchy in whatever way that is, right? Whether that's my mom or whether that's, you know, working for my boyfriend, right? And merely working for my boyfriend, or working for my boyfriend instead of insert whatever, like, you know, false choice liberation alternative, whatever, what there would be, right?
Which is the way she frames it, is like, I'm like thinking here of like Bell Hooks's critique of like choice feminism. When you're talking and Jackie says right after the you work for your boyfriend comment from her mom, she says, I left a 6-figure salary to help him do something special, and we're doing it. It's both the like choice feminism, right, that's lingering there, and the belief that the Tara Fund is something special, which is I think on some level self-delusion. I think delusion is definitely the right word. Whether it's how willful a self-delusion is, I think an open question for some of the reasons you've identified about Jackie's inscrutability.
Yeah.
In this chapter, as she tries to grapple like with her newfound elite wealth, power, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think we're supposed to A, like her, or B, root for her?
I think we're supposed to root for her and not like that we're rooting for her.
So she's supposed to be a window into our discomfort with ourselves.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I like that read.
Or like the bougier parts of ourselves or something.
Yeah. Do we want to discuss the end?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Yeah. So Jackie goes to Venice, which is part of the tension with her sister initially.
Yeah.
Her sister says, you haven't visited Mom. And she says, I have to go to Venice. Italy?
I have to.
Yeah. So she...
Right, because Venice, Florida would be the category in their mind, because she has one of her brothers is in Florida.
So she gives into the guilt. She goes that she has this interaction with her mom. And then it cuts to her in Venice. And she's getting calls from her sister and ignoring, assuming it's the same repeat, like crying wolf in her mind emergency, right? And then she finally answers, and she discovers that there's a flood, which she sort of already knew, right? Fred shows her a photo of Indianapolis underwater, right? And she's sort of like, whoa, and then does not think about it any longer, right? And she finally talks to her sister, and her sister is in Florida with all her kids, and she's freaking out. Like she forgot basically to check on their mom. And she's like, we can't get a hold of her. So Jackie leaves Venice.
Jackie gets a plane, is how she describes it to her sister. And her sister also calls her out on it in this moment.
But she ends up not getting a plane, right? She gives Fred the plane.
Yeah.
And flies commercial.
Yeah. And flies coach on one of the legs.
Yeah. From Frankfurt to London, right? Or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. You could tell we're avoiding describing the end.
Well, I mean, there's something about the note that her mom leaves behind in particular, and the description of it. It certainly was a note written in her stunted, boxy handwriting, but it made no sense. And just visually, it sticks out, right? It's the floor's wet. space was all it said. I don't know. The floor is wet is such a like chilling, haunting line, even before, right, you then read, right, the next, the next two paragraphs in, and find out that like that's a suicide note of her mother.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm wary of being like, well, let's do the literary symbolic analysis of what all the different meanings of the floor is wet, because there's something about the viscerality of it that is important to capture too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the part of the narrative after her mind kind of sees her mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
That speaks to this question of who she is and the conversation we've been having about like to what degree she knows herself, right? It's like she's like trying to make sense of something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from a sort of literary analysis perspective, there's a little bit of an analogy there, right?
Yeah.
Of like what it means to grapple with this, like this new and horrible information that she's processing. And like she's been sort of flirting with the idea of grappling with the reality of kind of the situation she finds herself in, sort of the whole chapter, arguably the whole novel so far.
Yes, and I mean the line that she gives about this particular moment, I think, speaks it precisely to that point. So after she describes a like incredibly gruesome image of her mother who has killed herself, Jackie says, "At first, I just stared as my brain tried to make sense of it, and stupidly, I wondered if my mom had decided to play an extremely elaborate prank," which is chilling in its own way. But it's in this sentence that I think speaks to the point you just made. The contortions our minds will attempt in order to tell us that what we are seeing is not real is obviously and most directly like I thought my mom was playing an elaborate prank when really she like has been dead by suicide for several days in this flooded house. But like that's also the contortion she goes through to have this life with Fred, to have her 1% or 0.1% life, to
think that the Terra Fund is doing something amazing,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And like when you juxtapose what the Terra Fund is with like the the descriptions of Fred gives over the philanthropic work to her and the like list of charities.
It's like extremely giving Aristotle.
Right? The contortions,
Mm-hmm.
Jackie, for real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a brutal read.
Yeah. And we've talked previously about the way the novel and the way that Markley gets us to identify with Keeper. And in some ways that's, I think that's a very like classic question that a artist is going to pose in a work of fiction or film or TV or whatever. Can you or will you, how do you feel about identifying with this objectively like bad person who does a whole ton of terrible things, but the structural like way that identification and cathexis works in fiction and et cetera is going to have you identify with them on some level. Jackie poses a different version of that same dilemma. And in some ways it's like asking you to question your own contortions more than the way that the Keeper, how and are you going to identify with Keeper, right? That's not a simpler, but requires less contortions to think through than that. Are you, reader, going to identify with Jackie, particularly if you are of her age cohort, particularly if you are whatever.
Yeah. And particularly if you are climbing a socioeconomic ladder, right?
Yeah.
If you're climbing a class ladder and you care about things like donating money to Planned Parenthood, you know what I mean? Like say nothing of, we don't know really like who she's voting for in her heart, right? We know from last time that she's ruthless when it comes to proving she can play, which means playing with
rat fucking Kate.
Yeah. Like
what she comments on again directly.
Yeah.
And she's like, Kate should have been a better opponent. I had her too easy. She was too easy on me.
Yeah. Right. Which also implies that whatever was orchestrated the last time we saw Jackie has a bigger hand in Kate's public image dissolving or fracturing or becoming so contentious than we've realized from other perspective chapters, right?
Yes. And this is another reason why the FBI report is so useful, because the FBI report gives some of those bigger machinations that are happening.
Yeah. But like not so much information.
No, definitely not. There is so much cryptic foreshadowing about this chapter, actually.
Yeah.
And it strikes me how often, and maybe it's because I just listened to, you said that the last episode you had edited was Shane too, that how frequently Kate comes up in the mind of characters who are not Matt that we have access to.
Yeah.
Like all of them except for Keeper, I think are like recursively thinking about Kate all the time.
That's true. Yeah. And like to themselves and their private reflections.
Yeah, definitely to one another, of course, like particularly the like Shane Kai conversation in Shane 2, for instance.
Right.
But again, it's the Kate is the main character, but the main character doesn't get a POV in this book.
Yeah.
Sort of dynamic.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
Do we want to say anything else about the question of Jackie vis-a-vis her family?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
What else struck you about this chapter?
Okay. This chapter was really difficult for me to read, but there's one paragraph that really like kind of shook me from my general, I don't even know how to describe the affect of reading this chapter, but it's like, it's sort of like, I guess I knew it was coming. So it's a little bit of dread.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like a latent tension and you're just sort of like, why is this so hard? But there was one paragraph that kind of lifted me out of that for a moment. And I was like, what is going on here? So they're in Venice. They're at a breakfast that's like 3 investors and Jackie, Fred, and
Peter.
New reveal of like crossover character. Yeah. Peter is like the person who recruited. He owns TerraFund basically, or like TerraFund is Ashes.
Using Ash's NBA model that now is doing fucked up private equity shit.
Yeah. So or like
fucked up hedge fund shit, I should
worlds
say.
colliding even more than or continuing the world collision that we get in the El Demonio chapter. So in the middle of this conversation about I don't even know, the various players that are part of the fund.
Yes.
We get Jackie describing an interaction at breakfast. So she says, the waiter came and we all paused, sitting in silence as the thin Bengali man scraped crumbs off the table and inquired in halting Italian if we'd like more coffee. Our tour guide had explained to us that most of Venice's working class was from Bangladesh. They commuted in from mainland Italy where rents were affordable and made their living selling vegetables and knockoff sunglasses to tourists. They took up pizza making and tossed the dough like they'd grown up in Napoli and played the violin for restaurant diners. He finally left. Nate's shirt lifted as he craned back. So like back to their conversation. Mm-hmm. I was like, what is this paragraph doing in this chapter? And it, for me, linked to a question you raised earlier, which is like, what is this chapter doing in the novel?
Let me answer the first question and I'll leave the second question to you. So the first question is that I think it goes back to a point you made at the very beginning of the episode, talking about Jackie's awareness but distancing, or like her affective relationship to how power functions in the world or circulates in the world or something like that, that she knows enough, is aware enough, is millennial enough, is well-intentioned or virtue signaling, depending on how you look at it, enough to notice that like so many of the service workers are Bengali, and to ask at least one question to find out more information about it, but then it goes nowhere. Mm-hmm. And I think that is one of the moments that's indicative of how you opened our episode describing her as.
Oh, it's like her almost having a moment of like kind of self-confrontation and then like turning away from it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For Norman Nate to scratch his hairy belly.
Yeah.
And say, I don't know, man, you got a bunch of the SJW left swinging for a guy who was a radical right-winger a decade ago. How's love pulling that off?
It's a wild juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And very funny. But I do think it's it to the point of like to the point that you made earlier about how the question markly is forcing us as readers to think about Jackie as like a little thornier maybe than the question of Keeper. Mm-hmm. That like when we read this paragraph, are we like, oh, yeah, oh, that's really
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Or,
Yes, I am. I have to admit.
uh-huh.
I have to admit this to our millions of
Yeah.
listeners.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's you know what? You know what my first thought was?
Please.
Is that a real migration pattern,
Hmm.
or is that one that Mark Lee sort of invented for some purpose of like storytelling, whether about climate migration or about like race in Italy, or about like Jackie's perception of like, I don't know, race versus class or something like that. And but I was like, is that real? Was like the question that
It's,
first popped into my
it's a
mind.
great question. I mean, and so I was in January. I was in Iceland, right? And like,
Mhm.
of course, I wanted to like ask questions so I could know about like what are the migration patterns of right foreign workers in service industries in Iceland because there are many of them,
Mhm.
particularly like from Spain and Portugal, actually a lot, but then
Mm.
also from like former Spanish and Portuguese colonies as well.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and then it's like, what do I get from having asked, from having thought to ask?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's an uncomfortable question.
Yes, especially because one of the things I fucking did with that knowledge was enjoy the restaurant where we talked with the chef who like was Puerto Rican and he and his wife like migrated to Iceland to start in rural Iceland, or not that rural, but like in a town in Iceland,
Yeah,
this restaurant that is like mixing Puerto Rican cuisine and Icelandic cuisine.
that sounds
And like
delicious.
enjoying the best pumpkin soup I've ever had in my life
Yeah.
from this couple.
Yeah, so I think like we're not grappling with the same class
Yeah.
guilt as Jackie, but I think Markley's asking us to ask about our class guilt,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
which is uncomfortable. And maybe that's kind of one of Jackie's functions in the novel more broadly, and thus kind of what this chapter in particular does.
Yeah.
And the question of like, this is a little bit back to her mom,
Yeah.
but like in that moment, who are we feeling sympathy for and why? And
Hmm.
like, is it Jackie, or is she like the villain in that moment? Or is she both, and like, how does the chapter invite us to think about that is, I think, hard.
Yes. Well, it strikes me that there's a way in which each of the Jackie chapters confronts the reader with a hard question we probably wouldn't want to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. So the first question is the first chapter is a question about like how consensual or not, right, was the time she has sex with the pastor, like vis-a-vis condom use in particular, and like how does she view that encounter in relation to the thematization explicitly in their conversation of Me Too,
Yeah.
in that. In the second Jackie chapter, it has to do with like girl bossing and the glass ceiling
Yeah.
and recognizing like, yes, she experiences like sexism and patriarchy in the workplace. And her answer to that is to be more fucked up, right? Like, how
Mhm.
do you feel about that, reader? And then in this chapter, it's all the questions we're asking ourselves. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's none of those are comfortable
Yeah.
in whatever the version of it for ourselves, or the people around us or our workplaces or whatever are that we ask
Yeah.
ourselves as a result. Like, I don't particularly want to spend a lot of time thinking about that.
No, it's hard. And when you frame it in the context of particularly climate change, it's also uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Because as I just said nonchalantly 4 minutes ago, I flew to Reykjavik. I definitely should not
right,
have fucking done that. Like,
right.
was I teaching Catriona McKinnon like literally last week? I sure as fuck was. And,
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's why these chapters are so hard. And like, and you go to like Murray Bookchin, right? Like, we
Yeah.
should not be living in cities when
Also,
things are
yeah.
this
Yeah.
dire. Yeah.
Yes, vis-a-vis that, generally cities, like if they have a good transit network, are less climate destructive than
Yeah.
other ways of living in the way the US has organized itself, like
Right.
spatially and
Right.
capitalistically.
Or like how we
Um,
get our food, how
mhm,
we meet our other needs that provide
mhm.
certain, or how we meet our needs for other kinds of goods and services, like
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Which
Yeah.
it's the perfect example because Jackie, at the very start of the chapter makes that point. She says she's probably the only person there that asked about like where was the I forget what she was eating, but where
she
the
thinks
food
about
came
the
from.
farm.
Yeah.
She doesn't even ask. She thinks about it.
Right. And that she's the only one who did, which is how it fits in the novel is, I think, a later question, because it's a chance just to marvel at the intricacy of Mark Lee's plotting and his ability to weave things together. Like, as you pointed out, Peter comes here, right? The pastor comes back. We get details, so many details about the world of the novel in 2032 without having to like fully exposition dump.
Yeah.
So here I'm thinking about, we learn about what the aftermath of El Demonio fire was in LA through the fundraiser. We hear about the driverless cars and how those work. We hear about the armed guards at the supermarket, right?
Yep.
Which we got a little glimpse of in a Keeper chapter. But there's just like the way that we find out about the world is, I think, part of this. And just like the quote unquote paying off different storylines, right? The pastor comes back again and they're in the same space. And Mark Lee teases us that there's going to be some sort of like dramatic confrontation and then yanks it away from us.
Yeah.
We have Peter. Now we have to like reevaluate our mutual bro love for Peter from the very beginning of the book. And especially as he's like calling in a sex worker from the UK to hang out with him in Italy, when apologies if I'm spoiling something. I forget, and temporality speaking, are he and Hanaya together yet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I thought that was the case.
They're together in book 2.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They already have a kid in book 2.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Right, so that's there as well. We get the aftermath of firing of Kate in this chapter as well.
Yeah.
So of how Fierce Blue Fire has transformed itself, so that Rikia and Tom are at this fundraiser as well. And now that they are more sensible, Jackie will interact with them and give money to them. Even she gives money to Fierce Blue Fire at this point. It's fucking wild. She is one of the people who destroyed it, and
she's so smug about having won, right? Like their presence there and her ability to donate to them is evidence of her having won, right? Whatever, like a game that kind of only she was playing.
Correct.
Well, not really, but like in the way she's constructed the stakes of the game, like she's the only player.
Yes.
Yeah. In a sign of the times, they were speaking to none other than the president of the Sustainable Future Coalition, Emmy Lee Song, and I felt a small swell of pride.
Especially because she's the one. I know where you're going. Go
3 years later, the SFC had been sure FBF was going to replay the French Revolution in the role of the sans culotte. Now they're rubbing elbows at the same party. It's just
chef's kiss. Yeah. And that Jackie is proud of how she like kicked out the old white dude who was in charge of the SFC and got a woman of color in that place in like some great girl boss allyship.
Yeah.
Oh man, fuck. This chapter is a tough one. The politics of it are also tough. The political economy of it also very, very tough.
Yeah, really, really brutal. We see at this fundraiser, we get the boozed wealth circulating, right? There's full-on celebrities, Jennifer Lawrence and Ben Affleck. Also, is the implication that they're together?
Oh, absolutely.
And then it's another Jen and Ben part version 17 or whatever.
I believe that is. I'm choosing to believe that's the purpose.
Hilarious. Fred and Jackie are at a dud table.
Yeah.
A nobody table. Capital N, capital T, actually. With some bobbleheads from Fox News and a California marijuana magnate, which is hilarious. And then we see like a California congressman at some point. So a lot of people who are big in California, but also like the top trader from Goldman Sachs is there. These like CEOs from law firms are there. The pastor is there, right? So like everyone there occupies some sort of position of power, either in Hollywood, in Washington, or on Wall Street.
Yes.
So there's a sort of like argument that there, I think, is any distinction between those three sides of power is sort of collapsing.
Yes.
In 2032, if not in our own moment.
Yes.
But the pastor kind of cuts across some of those, right?
Sure does.
He is not like, in fact, he's a Hollywood reject, which is sort of what takes him into religious celebrity.
Yes, because he spoke out against cancel culture.
Yeah, and he is kind of like indiscriminate with who he critiques politically, right? It's basically just like anyone who disagrees with whatever his prophecies, kind of whatever's like vague political content his prophecies or his reading of doctrine might entail. So like he wants people to sign up for a religious registry, right? And some congressman says, that basically I'm going to imply that that's like a Nazi, you know, Germany strategy, and he cuts him off and says, so what? The BIPOC GND endorses a racial registry to allocate reparations payments. This is not a non-mainstream idea, right?
Yeah.
Just like, and the idea that like a registry is that I think it's interesting to use registry because we could just call it a database, right? Which is like something that already exists. Like we have the census, right? So like what registry kind of implies either a different degree of coercion or a different degree of permissiveness, depending on who wants the registry and for what political project.
Because what you also call a registry, a wedding registry or baby shower registry at the same time that the like, let's figure out who all of the people of color, the Muslims, the Jews, etc. are.
Yeah.
So, to make it easier to target later on.
Yeah. So now he's the de facto leader of the Christian right, oozing wealth and confidence.
Oof.
Yeah.
And the falsity of his performance as pastor, but also the question of, this is a Jackie question as well, and like why they're intertwined after having sex with one another in the first chapter from the perspective of writing of the novel, that like the pastor is simultaneously a true believer in pure projection of what he thinks his audience of believers wants. And there's something about like the suaveness with which he navigates this scene that I think we're meant to read back on Jackie herself.
I am going to try to offer us a frame to think about that in our market and competitive landscape section of the pitch deck.
So am I.
Oh my God, that's really funny. Wait, what if this is the time we come with the same theory?
It'd be really funny if we did.
Okay. Also, Barack Obama is here.
Okay, we have to talk about the Obama thing because it's so real, right? So Obama is there while Michelle Obama...
He's friends with Fred.
Yes,
also.
yes. Michelle Obama is doing voter turnout in Texas while Obama is schmoozing, which I think we should read as Mark Lee's political beliefs about the two of them, right, in the time of him writing. Yeah. And then to your point about Fred, he jokes that Fred is a, quote, barnacle in our democracy, end quote, and then also says that Fred is one of the few people that can talk to both sides of the aisle, which means, or it's implied that you must be a barnacle on democracy in order to talk to both sides of the aisle, which is just, it's really, really funny and also kind of chilling. Yeah. How like Mark Lee got him here.
Oh yeah. And then he follows that up with, having only just met you, Jackie, I can already tell you're the brains behind the operation.
Yeah.
It's just like that gender world,
And Jackie swoons and comments on and acknowledges her swooning.
Yeah. Yeah. She's like, I'd go home with him right now. Right? Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know if you have come across this, but they're doing quote unquote Millennial Week on the Ringer website this week.
Oh my God.
And so the fact that we're having this conversation at the end of this week, and I've like read several pieces about millennial culture and millennial politics, including one specifically about the complicated relationship of millennials with Obama, is a little bit galaxy brain moment for me right now.
Yeah, that's really funny. I mean, my favorite very, very cynical line about Obama, right?
What's that?
At least he's a hot war criminal.
Yep. I think that solves the problem and solution.
Great. Okay, so now's our attempt to sum up our problem and solution in a punchy key product feature sentence, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I went with Jackie's quote unquote realism looks a lot like denial, as warning signs of the flood to come pile up around her, pulling at her ankles until finally she can't look away.
Ooh, That's really good. I was on the same wavelength, I think, but not as effectively. Jackie struggles to define herself or selves as she enters the 0.1%, all while the climate change fueled weather constantly interrupts her best laid elite plans.
Yes. And I guess I'll just add as like an additional plot note that it should kind of, I think is at very least in the background of all we've been talking about. The background environmental condition of this novel is like the water is rising.
Yes.
Right there. There's a storm in New York during the benefit, and like there's like flooding in the lobby or whatever, or like some sort of issue with the security, and people are like more wet than they should be, right?
Yes.
Then there's the storms in the
I
Midwest,
wonder what that could mean.
Indianapolis. Yeah, right. Indianapolis underwater. And then when they're trying to leave Venice,
Mhm.
the hotel lobby is flooded, and Jackie has this moment where she's like, oh, I guess Venice really is going underwater. Everyone's just walking around in galoshes with
As
like
if this is normal.
as if this is normal. So
Yeah.
it's not even an emergency situation in the Venice situation.
Just for the tourists in the fanciest hotel in Venice.
Yes, but for everyone else, it's business as usual,
Yes.
right? The tide came in a little too high, and now everyone's walking around literally in shit-covered boots.
Yes.
It's wild.
Well, and I mean that the first floor of the hotel is flooded, and she goes to a flooded first floor of her family home is also part of this. Can I add one more plot note while we're in our key product features? Just that the product that's discussed the most in this chapter is like the Tara Fund and its AI itself.
Yes.
And if you're interested in like AI and speculative financial capital, if you're interested in cryptic foreshadowing, like reviewing all of the shit that's happening there in like roughly page 395 to 400 will give you a field day in both counts. That's what I'll say.
Okay, great. I'm super nervous for market and competitive landscape.
I don't love mine, so I think you should go first. But I will tell you when you say it whether or not we ended up in the same place.
Okay. Well, I was gonna get us there with a little detour.
Please, you know I love a theory detour.
Okay, so on page 397, Peter refers to Jackie and Fred. He greets them. He says, "Damn, this power couple. You put Bogey and Bacall to shame," referring to Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Okay, so I was thinking about what that does as a callback.
Okay.
Or as a reference. One thing is that there's the age, kind of obvious, like age difference, power difference, right? I think they had like a 23, 25 year gap between them when they first get married. When they first meet, they're on a film together, and Humphrey Bogart is married and has like a volatile marriage, right? With this woman who very famously, like they would fight. They had like I read an article that they had like a carpenter on hand to like patch up the house after one of their like famous fights or whatever. And all the people they partied with talk about like stuff getting broken.
Yeah. It's a 25 year age.
25 years. Okay.
Indeed.
And like at first she's sort of like, I don't know about this guy. And then they like, you know, in her like memoirs or whatever, she talks about him very lovingly. And it doesn't seem like, however we want to measure it, he was like a horribly abusive husband or whatever. But the other thing that's really interesting about this as a reference is like the period of time in Hollywood where they're famous and the kind of like stories that they're famous for. So they're first start making movies together in the 40s. In 1945 is when they get married, and they get married 2 weeks after the like Allied victory in World War II. Do you know where they get married, John? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay. So they got married on this farm in rural Ohio that was owned by this guy named Louis Broomfield, who wrote a book about it in 1933, where he his grandparents and great grandparents, his family kind of had this farm that was like their homestead. And he went away as like a young person to Europe to sort of like, you know, do something different with his life. And then when the war starts heating up in Europe in the 30s, he returns to Ohio to sort of like, you know, take over his kind of destiny or whatever. But he ends up turning the farm into kind of like a early, like organic farm situation, but it also becomes sort of like a playground for like rich people and Hollywood types. So he hosts a lot of parties there. Humphrey Bogart is like a fixture there. And that's where they get married. So I was like, this is really fascinating because it's like farms, Ohio,
Ohio.
but wealth, and this juxtaposition of like, yes,
Actors.
rich people being like, oh, but I'm, here I am on this organic farm or whatever. And this thinking about that took me to Ronald Reagan,
Okay.
which took me to Michael Rogan's book,
Ah,
Ronald Reagan, the movie, and other episodes in political demonology.
an incredible pull and not what I'm going
Not
with.
what you, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So in this book, which I don't remember, I think I only read it in grad school because my advisor was working on an edited volume of his works
Mhm.
and like writing an intro in conjunction with another political theorist to like kind of make a case for why he ought to be more widely read
Yes.
in the canon of political theory. And I actually copy edited the
Yeah.
volume. So like I like read it through
Yeah.
editing it, and the whole time I was like, why did I not read this in like a class? It was just like
Great question.
struck me as very, very interesting and like a very like classic political theory way to try to bridge the gap between like critical theory in the Marxist tradition and like psychoanalysis, frankly, and kind of
Yeah.
like just old school like political theory
American
of
political development
American
too.
political thought. Yes,
Yeah.
like he talks a lot about kind of like the paranoid style in American politics and like Louis Hartz, right? Like those are kind of his like his
A
people.
banger, yeah.
But in this book, he makes this argument on the very beginning of the book where he says, this is like on page 3 in the introduction, where he says, this chapter investigates the making of Ronald Reagan in 1940s Hollywood. The presidential character, I shall argue, was produced from the convergence of two substitutions that generated Cold War counter-subversion in the 1940s and underlie its 1980s revival, the political replacement of Nazism by communism, from which the national security state was born, and the psychological shift from an embodied self to its simulacrum on film. Reagan, I shall suggest, found out who he was through the roles he played on film by responding to typecasting that either attracted or repelled him, by making active efforts to obtain certain roles and escape others. Reagan merged his on and off screen identities. The confusion between life and film produced Ronald Reagan, italicized, the image that has fixed our gaze. In a deliberate imitation of the Reagan process, this chapter explores that confusion between life and film to bring the making of this president into view. So the whole chapter traces like the roles that Reagan played throughout the 40s and like kind of pulls out a sort of like psychic account of Reagan forming himself as like the president we know in the 80s through both these roles, but also his own narration of like the relationship between himself and these roles that he played. So like in particular, he talks a lot in his like writings about himself that about the like role he played where he didn't have any legs or something like that. And there's also this interesting moment where he talks about how like Nancy Reagan famously said that like that the Ron you see in the movies is just him, right? And like the Ron he is on TV is the same Ron he is in the White House, both in terms of like how he treats his role as a public figure, but also who he is in private, right? So there like is no gap in his own narration and in Nancy's narration between Ronald Reagan, the actor, and Ronald Reagan, the president.
Yeah.
And then like Rogan reads this as like the particular period of time in Reagan's career where he desperately wants to be like a leading man in a cowboy film, and he keeps getting cast as kind of like soldiers who are in some way frankly like disabled, right?
Yeah.
And like how he reconciles that with like with that move in displacing the threat of Nazism onto the threat of communism, and how communism comes to kind of embody like the like threat to the disabling threat to masculinity.
Ooh.
And that like American, and this is kind of bleeds over a little bit into like the conversation of Connolly we had in one of the Keeper chapters about cowboy capitalism, right? So then like and then like this gets picked up in like historiography of evangelicals, right? I don't know if you've read Jesus and John Wayne, but this historian makes a claim that like or reads Reagan in part like his flexibility as an actor, right? His ability to learn the script of evangelicalism as part of what made him successful in the 80s, because he learned to speak he learned to speak the language of the religious right and
I see where
became,
this is going.
right,
Yeah.
even though he wasn't. Yeah. This is a stretch, I told you.
No,
Even
it's not a stretch. Every step has been logical.
Even though he wasn't on paper what they would want, he becomes, like, he plays the role, right, of like who they want. So like the political demons first are Nazism, then they're communism, and then in the 80s it's like moral decay or moral bankruptcy, right?
Yes.
And so he sort of adopts the what was the moral majority and now becomes the Christian right as his like home, but for him it's where he gets to enact like his cowboy fantasies, right? And then I was wondering how to think about like our own, both our own and our temporality political moment and the political moment in this Jackie chapter with the like frame that Rogan offers us. And I have sort of two, I don't know, intuitions maybe. I wonder if Markley is kind of gesturing toward or opening up the possibility that like we're actually missing some kind of analysis like this of our political moment, right? Like but maybe actually maybe in the moment that the book was first written, we're missing that or missing like a healthy fear of that. But maybe now in the moment where we're reading it, where we see like, you know, all the PayPal mafia now suddenly occupying positions of power in government and like the like, you know, we have our piece where we talk about like the mundanity of their aspirations to grandiosity, but now
which keeps getting cited, I want to point out.
I know. But now they're sort of like to some degree realizing a little bit of that dream.
Yes, absolutely.
Even at the same time as they're like making blunders and keep like appearing like the opposite of grand.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. But I wonder like if the pastor or like the way Jackie reflects on that part you were just talking about is of the pastor, like, does he really believe what he's saying? Like, it almost doesn't matter, right? Because like,
agreed.
Because the like veil between like real world and like, you know, film in the 80s for Reagan, but like slapdish in or AI, right? The like the things that the generative AI is like producing for or
the FBI.
The FBI, right? That like the veil is like confused or collapsed or like doesn't.
Right, because slapdish further narrow, slapdish in its worldies further narrow the distance.
Yeah. And so like what's the difference between like President Randall and the pastor? The difference is that like President Randall can't like harness celebrity or something like that. And so like I think that's a part of her in everyone's perception of her as ineffective.
Yeah.
In addition, which is different from the analysis we get in the like really like Politico chapters, right? But in this, I think in this chapter that we can read a little bit of a like psychoanalytic assessment of like what's going on at the level of, I don't know, like public perception of these high profile figures and like the, you know, there's no political demon for Mary Randall, right? And so she can't like capture the public as a celebrity in the way that somebody like the pastor can. And even like Jackie's mom, right? When she says like, at least he's telling the truth, right? Like he's not even claiming to tell the truth.
No.
He's claiming to like be prophesizing the future, to have visions of something that is yet to come.
Yes.
And like, the truth is sort of like irrelevant to kind of what he's up to in that sense. And so like that, I don't know, it strikes me that Rogan's a way to think about the pastor, but also to think about like what's going on at the affective and psychic level of like this political stuff that we've been talking about in the really like kind of granular, formal party politics way.
I love that so much.
I've really found it really hard to do theory for this, and I spent a really long time thinking about how to make this tenuously work.
So for my marketing competitive landscape, I want to point out, because there's an obvious thing. It's Peter Dovernay's book, Environmentalism of the Rich.
Yes.
Environmentalism for the Rich. I forget which one. But I'm not going to go there. Instead, I'm going to do something much weirder and not connected to Rogan, I'll say. One of the things that struck me as I was reading the chapter, and that I think was really brought out in some of the conversations we had about the role that this chapter plays in the book as a whole, and the novel as a whole, is some of the kind of temporality questions that we've been interested in and have been joking about for the entirety of our conversation about this novel. So I wanted to think about something that would enable us to consider the structural role of this chapter, would enable us to consider how temporality is at play both in this work and in our relationship to this work of the Deluge, that was going to be a little bit funny, and that also could account for the fact of the multiple different relationships, structurally speaking, that this chapter has to the book and to its audience.
Ooh, okay.
And so do you want to predict where I'm going?
No, I'm okay. I'm so excited.
So I think that the marketing competitive landscape of this chapter includes Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, but in a bad way.
Oh my God.
Bad eternal recurrence. So let me read.
I am so here for this. I cannot wait. Okay.
Let me read the classic passage from the Gay Science, then I'll get back to the novel. So this is Nietzsche, Gay Science 341. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, quote, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, 'You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine'?"
Wow.
And so I want to...
Also demon.
Exactly. It's a Descartes and it's a Rogan. The eternal recurrence of the demon in philosophy and political analysis. And so I want to point out the different kinds of eternal recurrences that are happening in this chapter, but all of which fall into the gnashing your teeth category in the quote, that I will try to make it meta about us as readers of this novel. Okay. There's the eternal recurrence of the pastor who has been on Jackie's mind in Jackie 2, and then here she meets in Jackie 3. And when we think about even some of the ways in that passage from the Gay Science, I thought about the sigh in particular, that oftentimes if there's something about a pleased or satisfied sigh or a disappointed sigh, that is a cliche way to describe somebody after they've just had sex. And I didn't go back and check to see whether that was true in the first chapter, but I could picture Jackie narrating her encounter with the pastor that way. There's the eternal recurrence in the way that we were talking about earlier in the episode about Jackie's mom and Jackie's family is the thing that keeps coming back to her no matter what she wants, consciously, unconsciously, what she yearns for, what her will to power is vis-a-vis her relationship with her family. Yes. That's an eternal recurrence that she keeps coming back to, that keeps coming back to her, that keeps drawing her in and drawing her back. And she goes back to Iowa twice in this chapter. It's not just one, it's a second trip back to Iowa in this chapter. So I think there's something eternally recurring about her family, and more specifically, what the challenge her family poses to her as self-definitional in the way we were talking about earlier. Also eternally recurring in this chapter is the theme of the novel, the water is rising, right? To use your point from earlier, that this is yet another chapter in which there is a lot of precipitation and it fucks up the lives and plans of the people that we are experiencing the novel through. There's even some eternal recurrence of some of Mark Lee's peccadillos, the cancel culture question returns in this chapter because Jackie's narration of the pastor is about cancel culture in part. And so there's Mark Lee himself can't get out of this eternal recurrence of his preoccupation with something like cancel culture and its repercussions, right? So in all of these ways, I think there's something about the looping temporality of this novel, in which it's always operating at several different temporalities, is I think you've laid out several times over our project about this book together, that is also at work here. So like the ultimate question then, I think that the Nietzsche reading of eternal recurrence in this chapter in this novel is like, well, what actually are you going to or willing to affirm? And like, what would cause you to do the gnashing of your teeth? And then like the political question is like, where does agency lie within that? Which of course is like a cliche free will determinism argument. And then obviously comes back in a totally different way in Nietzsche.
Yeah.
And so there's like something about the, all right, I was listening to Shane too, as I said earlier, and it's like, are you a Kate or are you a Shane?
Yeah.
Right? Like both of them have, I think, different questions, like the eternal recurrence of social movements or political violence or whatever the case may be, and all of those kinds of things. So I don't quite know how to land
the eternal recurrence of co-optation too, right?
Like, exactly. So I don't know how to land this plane, but neither did Nietzsche. So I'm going to end it.
Well,
there.
I mean, that's how you land it. Wow, I really, really like that.
Thank you. And I think eternal recurrence also sets up my weird cultural artifact, but we'll get to that.
Perfect. I also think it's an interesting way to think about. It's more interesting way to think about how the past relates to the present than a sort of like the empty platitude of like history always repeats itself, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because
and the other thought I had was to like go back to some of our earlier discussion in this episode, like. Also, there's a return of the repressed analogy that's at work here. But like, I don't think repression is the right framework in which to think about Jackie. I think that's something like a concept and a thinker you have brought into our podcast before, like Charles Mill's epistemology of ignorance or Linda Alcoff epistemology of ignorance. Those are, I think, the more relevant categories for Jackie, at least.
Yeah.
Repression.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, that was so good. I really liked that.
Me too. All right, let's lighten things up with some comedy. Our operating model, whatever that means. I don't think we've quite determined what that means, right?
No.
Great.
We've just been using it for the millennial comedy section.
Yeah. The Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lawrence thing was very funny to me.
Really funny. I also think it's funny that we have called our comedy section the operating model, because Peter, one of our favorite like purveyors of comedic relief, I guess, in this novel, appears in Jackie chapter for the first time, and we learn is like part of the like a key part of the operating model of the Terra Fund. So there's just like a nice little thing there. I really laughed at.
Well, I'll pick up on your Peter point while you're finding about that, because I think one of the funniest things is Peter talking about, did you guys ever think we'd be here taking meetings in Venice with these 3 fucking rainmakers? Fuck, I had to take out insurance on myself just in case I woke up and it turned out to be a dream. And then Jackie with like this repartee, is that a product you're thinking of creating? Goldman would probably draw it up for you. Peter looked from me to Fred. See, this is why we're both in love with her. This is all a dream. Default swaps. T-ads. They pay out when you wake up and the whole thing was too good to be true. And the idea of like, was I actually dreaming credit default swaps is really, really depressing, because there's like, I don't know, like young Chilhan, like psychopolitics, but but like also me turning into capital that is, I don't want to think about it too hard. So I just want to laugh at this is all a dream default swaps.
That was exactly the passage I was looking for. Okay. So that's perfect. I also thought the paragraph where Jackie talks about lists all the orgs that she gives money to from the philanthropic work of the Terra Fund was very funny to me. So this is on 396. Regularized contributions to support the arts in the largest 15 American cities. The American Cancer Society. The World Wildlife Fund, which like the audacity, my guy. The Nature Conservancy, Planned Parenthood, Boys and Girls Clubs, 3 different nameless LGBTQIAA plus organizations, a network of charter schools specializing in STEM education and no excuses teaching philosophies. Which,
wait, is that your next move?
hold
No
on.
excuses, teaching.
I have an idea. And of course, we gave a hefty contribution to a fierce blue fire now that they'd embraced a less antagonistic philosophy.
That, of course, is doing so much work.
Yeah, it's too good. Okay, the other thing that really made me sad is when they ask Peter if he's staying on in Venice, and he says, "Got to, it'll probably be gone by the next time I have a chance to get here."
Uh-huh.
We all laughed at this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, ooh, it's not funny, but
it's very funny.
It's very funny. Yeah. Did we miss anything?
No, I don't think this was not a funny chapter.
No.
So I think we have to move on from the operating model in that sense. And Emily, I want to hear what your funding request, a title in the style of nonsense business jargon, you would like to propose as we ask for money for this project.
Yeah, I don't have a good one. I just did a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? A sort of nihilistic riff on the existing title. Not nihilistic. Okay. I wrote down New Trauma Horizons. But I think I meant to write Old Trauma Horizons, which is a very funny little slip there.
This opens the possibility for getting a nice parentheses into our episode title. It's like New parentheses Old Trauma Horizons is a very real option. I went with leveraging new horizons for the environmentalism of the rich, but I capitalized the Z in horizons.
Ooh, that's good. I like that one. Let's
not do the trauma plot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Do you have a trauma plot in our projections, our cultural artifact?
I do.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah.
Okay. Then you should go first.
Okay. I wanted to propose that we think this chapter, and one of the things that's difficult about it, and one of the sets of difficult questions it raises, with the Netflix series based on the novel 13 Reasons Why. Are you familiar with this source material?
I have not. I have not read nor seen the source material, but I'm aware of the capital D discourse around the material.
I have not consumed it either, but I very eagerly consumed the discourse, in part because I generally like teen stuff. So I'm interested in when people think teen stuff gets stuff wrong or when it gets its stuff right. But the series that based on the book is about a high school girl who dies by suicide and leaves a note, and 13 Reasons Why, right? Explaining. So the show got really, really criticized by, and particularly by adolescent psychologists for depicting the way in which it depicted how she did it, and B, how it actually handles the why question, and the ways in which it kind of places blame, right? Blame on kind of individual students. And then I was reading that they tried to kind of rescue it in later seasons, and that in season 3 it almost becomes the question of was she murdered is, I think, a question that becomes on the table, which is a really interesting way to sidestep the ethical culpability for how we actually deal with telling stories about, or telling stories that either about or that include, right? Because those are not necessarily always the same thing. Death by suicide. So I thought thinking about that question of how to do it is an interesting way to think about the function of that in the novel. And it kind of reminded me of some questions we've been talking about when we talk about Keeper and our whether we like him or how we identify with him or make peace with wanting to root for him in some way, right? But this question about how do you write about something how do you thread the needle, right, between the individual and the social, right? Which is obviously you and I are constantly kind of thinking about that, right? It's when it's one of the kind of teaching political theory 101 ways you teach about oppression, right? Oppression is not just individually held racist attitudes. It is structures that uphold, right, and legitimate those individually held racist attitudes, but that exist in somewhat independently. I use that loosely of them. And I was thinking about, how do we write about like white male loneliness without like opening the door to like the manosphere, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And like it strikes me that this chapter, in using even, right, death by suicide, is also kind of asking questions about itself.
Yeah.
And I don't think 13 Reasons Why is doing that. I think, and that's like, it's kind of like this is very simplistic, but like a bad example. But I wonder if like putting just general, conversations around the sort of function of a suicide, how to do it, right? Like, how do you write about it in a way that doesn't feel like torture porn or whatever the version of that is that deals with death by suicide? And then like what, yeah. And like that kind of just bringing us back to this question of what this chapter does in the novel. So that's kind of what I propose or the discourse I propose as a pair with this chapter.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think that the way that Markley does it is sensational without being sensationalizing, I think is the way that I would like put my evaluation of it.
Yeah.
In a sense that like I don't feel it falls into some of the torture porny traps that you note. And I think the relevant comparison, I mentioned this earlier, like literally just yesterday, I finished watching Judas and the Black Messiah with my African American political thought class. And like, spoiler alert for Judas and the Black Messiah, which is based on a true story. So like, whatever. But the main character of the film, Bill O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield, right, who is simultaneously like an informant for the FBI on the inside of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and like gets extremely close to Fred Hampton, portrayed by Daniel Kaluuya, while also becoming a revolutionary himself in the process. Gives an interview, the only on-record interview he gives. And the film includes throughout the entirety, and I'm not doing Judas and the Black Messiah as my pop culture, but you have me down this train. Like, it includes recreations with Lakeith Stanfield of an interview that the actual Bill O'Neill gave for Eyes on the Prize 2 throughout the course of the film. And then after the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark scene at the end of the movie, it like cuts to black to do some title cards. Well, while like revolutionary songs about Fred Hampton by the party are playing, and they then play an actual clip of Bill O'Neill answering the question that Lakeith Stanfield as Bill O'Neill started answering at the very beginning, like the opening of the film, the like prelude of the film. And the final title card is that like the night that Eyes on the Prize 2 debuted, Bill O'Neill killed himself. And like that's the end of the film, more or less.
Yeah. Wow.
And there's something about the sensational matter of factness that veers extremely close to like manipulative, or however you want to think about like tropey uses of suicide in culture.
Right.
While I think avoiding it, that speaks to me about both of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think like marking the difference is really important, right? Because it would be all just as like unrealistic to like completely avoid it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really difficult.
Yeah, and shouts to one of my students who had a like really brilliant and like precise comment about that particular moment in the one of the final title cards.
I love that.
I feel really bad about what I'm about to do in terms of my cultural artifact.
Sorry.
So please forgive me, Emily. Please forgive me, listeners. For my projection, I offer We Didn't Start the Fire, but the bad 2023 Fall Out Boy version and not the original Billy Joel version.
This is amazing.
I hate this song passionately. Love We Didn't Start the Fire. Friend of the pod, Danielle Hanley, claims to be able to do We Didn't Start the Fire like on her own without any notes, without any reminders, like on the spot. I believe her. She's a Long Island girlie, so I trust her. But there's something about the way that this chapter, as we talked about structurally, is trying to do all of the things and bring in all of the threads and all of the characters and do a lot of like future projections to use our gimmick for this part of the podcast.
Very nice.
All in one, and do so in a way that is like remixing, as you pointed out, the Hollywood finance capital, New York, Washington nexus, and like The verses of the updated Fall Out Boy version of this song are like really, really like uncomfortably cringe, but like also maybe really problematic versions of trying to bring those together.
Oh my God.
So I don't
know the remixed lyrics.
I don't know which of these. I don't know which of these to go with. Ooh, gosh, it's so bad. They're all so bad. I feel bad reading. Pick verse 1, 2, or 3, Emily.
2.
Okay. I'm not going to sing this. More war in Afghanistan. Cubs go all the way again. Obama, Spielberg, explosion Lebanon. Unabomber, Bobbitt John. Bombing, Boston Marathon. Balloon Boy, War on Terror. QAnon. Trump gets impeached twice. Polar bears got no ice. Firefest, Black Parade. Michael Phelps, Y2K. Boris Johnson, Brexit. Kanye West and Taylor Swift, Stranger Things, Tiger King, Ever Given, Suez.
What?
Yes.
That just blew my mind.
Yes. So what Emily identified is the Hollywood, i.e. pop culture, New York, i.e. finance capital, Washington, i.e. political affairs nexus, gets like really uncomfortably mashed together in the Fall Out Boy version of We Didn't Start the Fire. Plus, there is, and now I can't even refine the line, but there's something that Jackie says about the LA fires and the role of the fundraisers vis-a-vis the fire. That was like my initial tripwire for this.
Yes.
That like they're going to do the saving, but like they didn't start the fire, right? Yeah. So the chorus obviously is like, we didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning. So we get a little eternal recurrence back in here.
Wow.
We didn't start the fire. No, we didn't light it, but we're trying to fight it. And they're trying to fight it through the Hollywood, Washington, New York nexus that itself is problematically deployed throughout the entirety of this cursed song.
That is brilliant. I'm like fully convinced. I will be what's the end result of a pitch deck? Signing of the contract.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
We will be adopting
we're inking a deal. We've adopted a framework for a deal with Fall Out Boy for the 2023 version, and We Didn't Start the Fire.
That totally blew my mind.
And then the other thing, of course, about that is the millennialness of Fall Out Boy.
Right.
Vis-a-vis Jackie. So
yeah. Wow, that's really good.
I apologize.
That's good. No, I think it's great. It's very spot on. Okay. I have a note in the team section.
Please.
But I forgot to write down the name of this investor. So there's 3 investors they have breakfast with.
Yeah.
When we get the disruption about Bengali migration.
Yep.
And one of them is a woman of color.
Archana Bhattacharya. Yeah. Right.
Yes. Her firm is called Styx Capital Management. Yes. Like the river Styx. Which I thought was really funny because I was looking at, just reminding myself of some of her, like, right. So the river Styx is also a goddess. So it's like a river goddess. I was like, just trying to remind myself a little bit of some of the myths around her. And I was looking up some of the etymology of Styx. And apparently the literal meaning of it is something like a shuddering that is connected to the word for like hate or abhor. And it's like a loathing. So the Styx is like a loathing of the dead is like one kind of interpretation of it. So like she is the last point of crossing between the land of the living and the land of the dead, but also like hates the dead.
Okay.
And I was wondering, like, I feel like that's an interesting drop to make in this chapter.
It sure is. And also, cryptic foreshadowing alert. Like, this is not the last time we see Archana Bhattacharya.
I thought that might be the case. So I wanted to flag that name just in case it was relevant later.
Yeah. Sure is. I'd like to propose.
Wait, sorry. One more thing about the perfectness of like goddess or river or both, just like in like some reference to Machiavelli we've had to Machiavelli before. Okay, carry on.
I love it. I'd like to propose Tara Fund itself, and more specifically its algorithm, is a character that's a part of the team.
Okay.
And particularly the way that Jackie describes it. Let's see. But Peter's model and his team of analysts, these whiz kids plucked from the Ivy League, the acne still bright on their cheeks, had something special on their hands. And then here's the key part. Making bets with forward-thinking algorithms accounting for environment, weather, and water in groundbreaking ways, their model embraced risk assets at speed, dumping them at the exact moment before they could plummet in value. And then, as Fred put it, it's math, but it's also narrative. What are the underlying stories beneath the trends? And more importantly, how do we manipulate those narratives to our advantage? And how agential they make the model more so than the human analysts, I think means we should read Tara Fund and its AI model as a character that's part of the team.
Okay. That's good.
And we've got the other billionaires, right? Giuseppe Aliotti, who I don't think we've heard of before or hear from again, and then Norma Nate, who I think we saw in Tony's Davos chapter.
Oh, okay, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh boy, wow.
This has been a journey of an episode.
I know. I was like a little nervous to discuss it because it felt like kind of icky.
Oh, absolutely. Emily, 5 minutes ago, I was going on about Fallout Boy. We didn't start the fire. So this episode has given me the ick, no doubt.
Well, we have our favorite Ash next in our concluding chapter of book 3, right?
Indeed. Yes, absolutely.
So the third chapter from Ashir's point of view, which is the executive summary of election 2032. Ooh,
yeah,
boy.
That's going to feel beautiful and lovely. I have no doubt. That'll be so uplifting, uplifting after this chapter. But until our uplifting examination of the election of 2032, we are the Deluge.
And we are the Deluge.